Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced the beginning of the withdrawal of troops from Syria. Plus, the Ecuadorian government seizes nearly 2 tons of drugs. Also in the United States, another big day of voting just around the corner. Thanks so much for joining us. For teleSur English, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. The Ecuadorian Coast Guard has seized nearly 2 tons of cocaine floating in the sea in the territory of the Galapagos Islands. The cocaine is estimated to be worth some $40 million. The drugs were believed to be destined for North America, and the operation, called Sea Hunter, was carried out in collaboration with both U.S. and Colombian intelligence support. The seizure took place on the territorial waters of the Galapagos Islands, and the cocaine is believed to have come from Colombia.
We're seeing the work that the Ecuadorian Navy is doing to control the aquatic spaces within the island region.
President of El Salvador, Salvador Sánchez Cerén, has announced a series of extraordinary measures designed to combat violence. Now, the measures are part of the security plan called Safe El Salvador. President Sánchez Cerén said that among the measures announced, El Salvador will see an increase in the number of security officers, crime prevention systems, and a larger budget to fight criminal activity. He also highlighted the fact that the plan includes greater control over the nation's penitentiaries. Before it goes into effect, the security plan must be ratified by Congress.
We have
prioritized these areas. The first is the deployment of more armed forces, understanding that this is an immediate response. We need to increase our operatives from civil society, but that requires a training process. Meanwhile, the armed forces can make use of the reserves. The second area has to do with the penitentiary system. We have to reduce the number of people who are in the penitentiaries. There are people who are not linked to crime, but rather who are behind bars for other reasons, and for reasons of age or health can be released from the penitentiary system.
Peru is gearing up for presidential elections next month. Now, while many of the candidates have been implicated in corruption, the left-wing candidate, Veronica Mendoza, she's getting support. We turn live now to our correspondent there in Lima, Raul Mora. Raul, can you tell us some more about Mendoza? What's her background there, and how much support is she actually gaining there?
Yes. Veronica Mendoza was elected Congresswoman in 2011. She ran under the Nationalist Party of current President Ollanta. However,
soon after, only a year after, she resigned from the party because citing that Ollanta had broken his promises to the electorate, and also because of the treatment of a social movement, the criminalization of a social movement in Espinar that was protesting mining developments over there. Now, Mendoza resigned, and she's currently part of a leftist coalition called Frente Amplio. And in a primary elections, she won the candidacy of president. And slow but steady, she's been gaining support to reach the 3rd place. She is a fresh face and also offers an alternative to the economic and social system, neoliberal, that it's applied in Peru.
Raul Mora there reporting with only less than a month away before those Peru elections there in Peru. Moving on now, we move on and we go to Russia, where Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his military to start withdrawing the main part of its forces in Syria. That will start on Tuesday. Russia entered into the Syrian civil war in September 2015, which tipped the balance in favor of the Syrian government, allowing it to recapture territory from rebels and terrorist groups. Putin made the statement during a meeting in Moscow earlier this Monday.
I believe that the goal set out by the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces has in large part been achieved, and that's why I'm ordering the Minister of Defense, as of tomorrow, to start the pullout of the main section of our military grouping from the Syrian Arab Republic.
And also on the topic of Syria, a new round of peace talks officially began in Geneva. The UN mediator in the Syrian conflict said if the talks fail, Syria will descend into even more serious conflict.
To make sure that the talks are focusing on the real issue, political transition. The alternative, some people call it Plan B, as you know. Well, as far as I know, the only Plan B available is return to war, and to even worse war than we had so far.
And as tomorrow marks the 5-year anniversary of the conflict in Syria, we bring you now this special video of a courageous war reporter who left the field of human rights to report on what is happening in her country.
اللي خلاني انتقل من المحاماة للإعلام هو لما بتكون عم تدافع عن الحق في شيء بحمسك لأنه أنت تدافع عن حق أسمى اللي هو الوطن، خصوصا نحن لما تعرضنا لأزمة مثل أي مواطن سوري. هلا هو الشيء الطبيعي إنه الواحد يخاف. أنا لما برجع ومعي مادتي على المكتب وبشوف أنا شو مصورة بكل شفافية رح أقول لك إنه أنا بقول أنا كنت هون، معقول إنه وصلت لهذا المكان الخطر. إنه هلا إنه أنا بنت ما بفكر بهي الطريقة كثير لما بكون بالميدان، ما بفكر إنه أنا مثلا بنت إنه أو شاب، في شباب بيخافوا في بنات بيخافوا، بس ربما هو إحساس المسؤولية، ربما انه كمان انه انت حدا عم بينطلق من حمل المسؤوليه من واقع حمايه الوطن، من الشيء اللي هو عقيده جواتك، الشيء اللي انه بدي انا دافع عن بلدي.
The ongoing Democratic primary elections will take a big turn towards deciding the rest of the race, with a number of important contests to be held on Tuesday in the United States. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders could sweep the primaries being held in the Midwest, according to new polls, which have Sanders leading or within striking distance of his rival Hillary Clinton in Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri. Sanders has been boosted by a surprise win that was in Michigan last week and is closing the gap between himself and Clinton.
To point fingers, to scapegoat, to blame. We are a country that lives.
And for more now on the primary elections, we turn to our correspondent there in Washington, Bianca Pit. She's in Washington, D.C. So what are the chances here, Bianca? We're talking about Sanders and Clinton. He pulled out a victory in Michigan. Polls are showing him gaining, but they still do show him behind in most states. What are the chances that he could boost that turnout and somehow pull off some big wins?
Well, Regan, there is always a chance that he could pull off those states. I mean, I think nobody was really expecting him to win Michigan, and he won that state fair and square. So the Midwest is definitely an area where he could take the lead from her without us knowing. Although the polls do show that she is still a little bit ahead, the numbers keep getting closer, and that's exactly what happened in Michigan. So there is a very big chance that he could take at least one of those 3 states that you mentioned, which are Ohio, Illinois, and of course, Wisconsin.
What about on the Republican side, Bianca? You know, really in the news these days has been the violence at those Trump rallies, time after time, protesters and a violent response to those actions. Is there any clear indication right now whether that the news cycle that has focused on those issues have either helped or hurt Trump?
Well, I think there's been a lot of backlash from political figures. We haven't really heard anything from his supporters as of yet. So it will be interesting to see if this will in any way hurt him. So it will be an important thing to see whether his supporters will continue to blindly follow him as they have shown in the past. He's still ahead in polls in all of the states that are doing their voting tomorrow except Ohio. So it will be interesting to see the numbers to figure out whether or not his supporters will change their mind because of this violence that has erupted.
All right, Bianca, we'll check back in with you tomorrow to see what happens. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Cody.
Moving on now, dozens of people gathered in Istanbul's Taksim Square to protest against the ruling government for not preventing the car bomb attacks that killed 37 people in Ankara over the weekend. Turkish police fired water cannons and rubber bullets at the protesters and detained several people. The government has blamed the Kurdish PKK for the attack, but the country faces numerous security threats, including the Islamic State group. Critics say Turkey has been too quick to blame the Kurdish group. Since Sunday's Ankara bombing, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan vowed a crackdown. He announced earlier today that 11 people have been arrested in connection to the attack. And even though no group has claimed responsibility for the attack, Turkey has launched airstrikes against Kurdish rebels in northern Iraq. Hundreds of refugees have crossed from Greece into Macedonia after finding a way through the border fence. However, Macedonian police have detained them, saying they will be returned to Greece. This comes after Macedonia closed its border, blocking the so-called Balkan route. About 14,000 people have been stranded at the camp, where conditions have deteriorated following days of rain. Following mass protests, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls unveiled a revised labor reform bill that makes concessions to trade unions. In the revised version, the government will no longer impose a cap on severance pay for dismissed workers. Instead, the new limits will be introduced as non-binding guidelines. Anders Behring Breivik, who killed 77 people in gun and bomb attacks in 2011 in Norway, is getting another day in court. This time, Breivik is claiming to be a victim of human rights abuses. The mass killer is suing the government over his solitary confinement, which he says is inhumane. The government has rejected that claim, noting that Breivik moves freely among his 3 cells and has daily access to an exercise yard, as well as a TV and a video game console. Ivory Coast authorities have tightened security at public places and at its borders after the jihadist attack there on Sunday. Now, the attack claimed by Al-Qaeda left 18 people dead and 33 more were injured. Among the dead were 3 terrorists. The country's interior minister said that the country will overcome the fear. South Africa's 8-day Cape Epic mountain race has kicked off. The race may be the toughest of its kind in the world. The riders who participate in the grueling event battle flash floods, brush fires, and wild animals on the track. Karl Platt from Germany and Robin de Groot from South Africa won the first stage. And that's what we're covering on this Monday from Caracas. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to follow us on all social media. For teleSur English, I'm Cody Weddle. We'll see you back here tomorrow.